Hi guys, welcome back to another video. So today is Monday, therefore we are going to be working in my sketchbook today. But I don't know if you can tell, but this footage is actually from March. Hence the little page that I have kind of like plastered into my sketchbook. So at some point during earlier this year, I decided that sometimes I would include some of the calendar pages from a flower calendar that I got as a gift. And I forgot I actually filmed the spread from literally the beginning of March, as this calendar page is kind of like the introduction to the month. So in the flower calendar, every beginning of the month kind of has this little kind of like a title card page, which happens to be this one. So I decided to stick this one in because it has like forget-me-nots and I'm assuming lilies, and I do like both of those flowers, so I thought it'd be cute to stick that into my sketchbook and do a brief spread of my OC Akemi. So I am going to be sketching with the palette color Eno in the color red. I decided to kind of continue the flower theme for the spread based on the flowers, a little bit like on the ones that are already presented on the calendar page, but I'm not going to stick too closely with it. I'm just kind of use that as like a general aesthetic. So for the most part, I liked using kind of like calendar pages from that specific little set in my sketchbook every so often to kind of like give a way to label the time in terms of like dating the sketchbook page, because sometimes I do forget to write the date for whatever spread or page that I finished that day. And I thought this would just be a cute way to add a little bit of color and add a little bit of a different texture, or at least something a little bit different, let's visual, to the spread. So kind of like continuing how I usually use water-based markers, I decided to pick these three colors to kind of better match with the color palette of the calendar page, except for the yellow that I chose isn't really present all that much in the actual flowers, but I feel like altogether the three of them look really cute as kind of like a spring themed color for the spread. Also, yellow is part of Akemi's kind of color palette, or some kind of like warmer light orange. Kind of fits his aesthetic as well. So I decided to stick with the yellow, and I feel like that always matches nicely with the blue. And for the most part, the colors do not match at all. And the water-based markers that I own are like, they tend to be a little bit more vibrant. Luckily, the green fits a little bit more closely with some of the darker areas in the leaves for the flowers on the calendar page. But for the most part, I wasn't like too concerned with matching the colors like super closely, because I already knew that I did not have any more like kind of pastel muted colors that would match as closely with water-based markers. So following the usual steps that I do, after I finish the sketch, I decide to kind of block in and chunk in the colors for certain areas of the figure or of the spread that I'm happening to be drawing. So in this case, I decided to use yellow for Akemi's eyes, a little bit of shading and shadows for his skin tone, alongside with a little bit of highlight, a lot of the flowers. And then after that, I went ahead and used the blue for the majority of his hair, alongside with some of the flowers that resemble forget-me-nots, just because it kind of matches the best. And I want at least a significant amount of blue, since it is kind of my mid-tone color for the most part. And I know a lot of the kind of like medium darkish green color that I chose isn't going to be as present throughout the entire piece, as there's actually not a lot of like leaves or that color going to be just like all over the spread anyways. Hopefully it makes sense. So I'm trying my best to balance out the colors, and later on you're going to see that I'm going to pull even more yellow on the spread to kind of fill up the space, just because it did feel a little bit empty anyways. So I don't think I really explained why I'm even pulling footage from a month ago, or at this point it feels like pretty much 2 months ago, since this is going to be at the end of April, I believe, if not the very beginning of May. But let's talk about inking first. So because this was at the beginning of March, I don't think I obtained that particular pen that I have showed earlier in some other videos where I did some inking in my sketchbook. So I think it's like the Pentel Energel pen. And basically, because I was beforehand, I was still kind of like fiddling with what kind of pen I wanted to work with this sketchbook again, just because You'll see a little bit from this pen that it kind of dispenses a little bit too much ink. So I feel like it doesn't produce as clean of lines. It slightly feathers in some areas, especially because I'm layering up a lot of the water-based ink, I guess, onto the page. It does make the page a little bit more saturated, and I feel like maybe breaks up the fibers a little bit. So the ink might feather even more than the ink already does on this paper. But I do like using this pen every so often because it does dispense a lot of ink, so I can get kind of like darker areas a little bit quicker if I really wanted to take my time and fill it in appropriately. But then usually, because it has so much ink, it actually leaves a little bit of ghosting on the back because this paper is quite thin. So as I kind of spend my time doing the details and just like playing around with the lines, which tends to be my favorite part whenever I do these kinds of spreads, and I get to kind of pick and choose lines or kind of make up new shapes here and there with the kind of contrast between the lines and the colors that are already placed down and then the white of the paper. It's just very fun to do and a little bit more freeing this way instead of coloring in the lines of my pen. No, how am I wording this? If I lay down the lines first, I feel it's like more like a coloring book, if anything, and I feel like more inclined to keep things looking pristine and clean or like staying within the lines versus something like this where I just ink kind of wherever, and it doesn't matter if it doesn't match too perfectly with what I've already had laid down with the water-based markers, as they're kind of like roughed in certain shapes for certain parts. Let's say like for the leaves and the foliage is like roughly planned out, but like some areas are going to be more planned out than others, and I can really determine that with just the lines that I end up placing anyways, so I don't really mind. But back to the footage. So I pulled this from the beginning of March, like you can tell, and the reason being is that hopefully this is not going to be the case, but I am prepping just in case that I might not be able to record a video before I have to send my computer in for it to get checked and potentially repaired. So I mentioned this in a few videos that there's a reason why I haven't been streaming all that often, and it's because I've moved rooms. And the reason why I moved rooms for my setup is that no matter what I did, I plugged in my desktop or like my computer into the outlet in my room. It would basically immediately trips the breaker, which makes it very difficult because it does not allow my computer to start. I also cause other devices in the same kind of like whatever's sharing the same power outlet through the walls or whatever also happen to turn off because it trips the breaker. So I don't want to cause hassle to my family, so I decided to move my setup downstairs so that I could use my computer. But every so often it will still trip the breaker for like some of the downstairs outlets as well. It's just like less frequently, and my computer can still run. So I do think like maybe my PSU is faulty, so I'm gonna get it checked. But if it needs to be replaced or anything, and there's like another problem that I have with it that might need to get replaced, and I don't know if I am going to have to leave my computer with them like for a few days, and it's so close to the weekend that I feel like if it did have to stay a few days, it'll be definitely after the weekend, which I don't know, it might cause a little bit of a problem in terms of filming. I do have my laptop still, which is perfectly fine that I can use it. It's just I have to change some programs back so that I'm able to use it on my laptop, alongside with the fact that my newer webcam is a little bit, at least like the way how it saves the file, it's just way too large. So if the quality of my videos visually goes down a little bit like it was last year, I do apologize, because I might have to revert back to how I used to film back in 2023, or at least until my computer comes back, if it does have to be taken in and stay there for a few days. So I'm kind of like trying to prepare myself, and luckily I did have this footage from a while back. I just don't know exactly why I never ended up using this footage at the time. I'm trying to rack my brain around. I think in place of this one, maybe I ended up doing, I don't know, the ASMR session where I drew Chiori from Genshin Impact with like the kind of 3-4 colors that I did for like a marker spread. I'm not too sure, because this footage, there was like nothing wrong with the footage or anything. It is me working on a full spread, and I did record pretty much everything of me working on this spread. So I don't know why I didn't end up editing the footage and uploading it as a sketchbook session for like a video. So at least it works out like in my favor, so I can have this as a backup. So if you're happen to see this on Monday, like, what is today? So today's the 25th. So yeah, if you see this on the 29th, it's most likely I didn't have enough time to film something else in its place, or I still haven't received my computer quite yet. So hopefully it's the former rather than the latter, but you know, that's okay. I just got a little bit lucky in terms I don't really have to rush to film anything in the meantime. But hopefully you guys are enjoying at least this spread. I actually really like this one, even though I do feel like the colors on the screen right now are a little bit more faded and it looks a little bit prettier in comparison to how it actually looks like in real life, where the colors are a lot more punchier and a little bit more vibrant. I'm still going to see if I can find another set of like water-based markers that are completely pastel. I definitely feel like they're either still too vibrant and lean towards like almost into mid-tone territory, or they're way too light where I can't even see them at all. So I want to find a balance, because my current set definitely not really have any like pastel colors, and then the one I have of Ohuhu version of like water-based markers, they're so pastel and like faded that I can't see them. They're still fun to use, but they're definitely super light. So yeah, it's a little bit hard for me to see, and I wish I could find like a middle ground for the most part, so that I could find something that's a little bit easier for me to work with if I wanted to use like a pastel color for like a spread or two. But like I mentioned earlier, I wanted to fill in some of the empty space with a little bit more yellow to kind of bring everything together. I did a very brief little semblance of some kind of border. I was trying to show you guys that I have some other spreads that I place in calendar pages, like the one I had with Kaisen back on the 13th of, I don't even know if that's February, but yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed watching today's little session. I apologize it's a shorter video, but hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye!